Hi, everybody. Al Bernstein here with another one of my boxing hangouts. And this one, always fun when we do the question and answer hangouts. And this is a combination of the questions that you have sent in to us and a couple of the folks that are on live with us and will be on live asking questions of me, and which, by the way, you can all do, and we'll be telling you as we go on about how you can do it for a future hangout. In addition, on this hangout, we have somebody joining us who just broke a very important story, and we wanted her to come on. She may have a question or two for me, but more importantly, we also wanted to ask her a little bit about what the story she broke and a couple of other things pertaining to her as a boxing journalist. And why don't I do that right off the bat? Bring in Jeandra LaBeouf, who runs a badculture.net, which is a terrific boxing website, and she does a podcast there. And Jeandra, it's good for you good of you to join us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here as always. Always look forward to joining you on these hangouts and talking a little boxing and just giving some more attention to the sport that supposedly is dying.
Yeah, I know. I sent a tweet out after Mayweather and Klitchko run the top 25 of the earning athletes in the world. I said, yet another sign the sport is dying. Not that that is the ultimate barometer of where the sport's at. 80,000 people going to the Frotch Groves fight and other things are bigger barometers. But here's the thing that you did this week that I thought was pretty amazing. You broke a story that has kind of surprised, I think, a lot of people in boxing, and I'm curious to find out how surprised you were at it when you discovered it. Mikey Garcia filing suit against Top Rank, his promoter. You were the first one to report on that. Tell us a little bit about you finding out about that story and what additional developments there have been in it.
It was very shocking to me as well. I was at the Robert Garcia Boxing Academy yesterday for the Maidana Open workout ahead of his match on May 3rd against Floyd Mayweather, and I was tipped off to maybe some grumblings. I decided to place a call to the law firm that is representing the case, and they sent me the legal documents, and he's in fact filed suit against Top Rank citing the Muhammad Ali Act. So I was very, very surprised because the last we had heard from him, he was setting up to trying to make a match with Yuriorkis Gamboa. Talked to him about that. It fell apart when they couldn't come to an agreement on financial terms. They'd had a lot of back and forth on Twitter. We couldn't reach an agreement on financial terms, and talks fell apart. He seemed optimistic that something was in the future. Then that bombshell was dropped in my lap, and I didn't want to say anything about it until I saw the documents from their attorney, and there it was.
Wow. Surprising, and you mentioned it was surprising. It seemed like it was clear sailing with Garcia and Top Rank, or is that wrong, do you think? I mean, it's obviously not the case now, we know, but it seemed like that, didn't it?
It seemed like everything was great. They were cultivating his talent. They were making the right matches. In his last match, he was victorious. He knocked down, but he got back up. Sometimes it's good for a young fighter to get knocked down. It makes them more endearing to the audience. He pulled out the victory in this match, and I thought they were growing him nicely. There are a lot of fighters over there in the Robert Garcia Academy that they were cultivating quite nicely on HBO, so it's just very surprising to see this development because there was just no indication that it was coming.
It'll be interesting to see how this affects future relationships. Kudos to you for breaking that story. If you can hang with us for a little bit, Dan, we'll go back to you maybe now, and unless you want to have... let's go to Dan Parks now, who is, of course, the producer of this podcast. And Dan, first of all, thank you for setting things up as well as you have. And this is a fun one today, a Q&A.
Thanks, Al. Yeah, really excited about this one again. We've had some really interesting questions. So there's obviously some great passionate fans that have some great questions for you, and also to have Jeandra, and we also have Alex, who was here with us last time, and also Neil, who made it here for our video question period last time, and props to them for being able to come in and ask a couple more questions with us.
Good. We're going to have some questions from them, and what do you say we get to some of the questions that we've been asked online, and then we'll get back to Jeandra in a little bit and get some thoughts from her.
Absolutely. Our first question comes from Michael R., and he wants to know, did Canelo make a mistake selecting Lara for his next fight?
Well, here's the thing about Canelo Alvarez, and whether you like him, don't like him, however you feel about Canelo, he is fighting as, I think, as difficult a group of fighters as you can fight. Remember, he was going to fight Paul Williams, and then Paul Williams had that tragic accident. That would have been quite a challenge. He took on Austin Trout, and had a very tough fight for him. Austin Trout was a champion, undefeated. He took on Floyd Mayweather Jr., a pretty good challenge, and Alfredo Angulo, and now here he is against Erislandy Lara, who is thought to be one of the best pure boxers in the sport today. Here's the way to look at this. You can look at this, when you look at common opponents, it shows you that we really don't know who's going to win this fight, because while it's true that Angulo gave Lara many more problems than he gave Alvarez, you could look at the Trout fights and say Erislandy Lara completely dominated Austin Trout, whereas Austin Trout fought Canelo to a standstill. So, that's an indication to me that this fight is going to be a very, very difficult fight. The question of whether he made a mistake, we're going to know in July when he faces him. I don't think he made a mistake for this reason. It is the fight that people wanted to see Canelo win, and it's the appropriate fight. And, we talk a lot about boxers not kind of sidestepping matches. In this case, he's not doing it.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Our next question, Al, comes from David C., and he wants to know what happened. Do you know what happened exactly with the Al Hayman Adonis Stevenson signing?
Well, that's a $64,000 question, isn't it? Clearly, we know this much. We know that Stevenson's promoter had a deal with HBO in theory or in principle, and a deal with Kathy Duva and her main events for the Kovalev fight. But once Al Hayman became the manager of Stevenson decided not to take this deal, though his promoter felt that he had already agreed to it. So we know that's the case. Exactly how he was talked out of it, we don't know. And then in the process, Stevenson also shifted networks and came over to Showtime from HBO because he didn't have an ironclad contract with HBO. So it was all acceptable, but the problem is for boxing fans, it took away what was potentially one of the marquee fights of this year, down at Stevenson and Sergey Kovalev, and that's the part that's very sad. But I think you don't have to read too much between the tea leaves to know that at some point Stevenson and Hayman collectively decided that they wanted to go in a different direction.
Oh, and there's probably a lot more money to be made that way, right?
Apparently there was a bigger offer, and they chose it based on the money. So, you'll get 3 or 4 different versions of this story. Those are the things that I think we know are basically true.
Okay. Next question is from...
cold, so if occasionally I blow my nose, people will know why.
Yeah, and by the way, for those of you who don't know, Al's been sick for a week or so, he or maybe even more than that now, and you're a super trooper even for showing up here tonight, and we really do appreciate you taking the time to...
Yeah, a lot of people around the country could probably identify with me because so many people I talk to have had this bug, and because I've got a couple of people here in the family, we pass it around to each other like everybody does. And Jeandra's got you have a daughter. I know you probably have passed some germs back and forth from time to time, huh?
My goodness, the kids are cootie magnets. You just can't escape them.
Cootie magnets. There you go. All right, Dan, what other questions do we have before we
Okay. Next question was from Mark W. He says, who does Al like in Cotto versus Martinez?
I'm free to predict on that one because I'm not announcing it. So the shackles are off. I actually like Martinez. I like Martinez if he doesn't have a physical breakdown. We don't know where he's at physically. He's had a long time to recuperate from some of the injuries he's had. He's been injured now in 2 fights in a row. And I think the question is, will he have any kind of breakdown of his body? If he doesn't, I just think he's too big and too tall for Miguel Cotto. And Miguel Cotto really is a fighter who came up from 140. Martinez has fought as high as 160. And I think Martinez, with his boxing skills, will be probably too difficult for Cotto. But if Martinez physically is not right, then certainly Cotto has a chance.
Do you agree with that, Jeandra? Is that your same call?
Absolutely. You know, in Miguel Cotto's last fight, he fought at 152, and now he's making a big leap to 160. When he fought at 154, he got totally obliterated by Austin Trout, and that kind of derailed the whole Canelo thing for him the first time. I don't think Miguel Cotto performs as well at a higher weight because it's not his natural fighting weight. He does better at 152.
That's a great point about the Austin Trout fight, because that is kind of that would kind of be a guidepost, wouldn't it, for Martinez, a tall lefty who knows how to box.
Right.
Yeah, and Martinez hits a lot harder than Austin Trout, so.
So yeah, but you hit the nail on the head when you say we'll see which Martinez shows up. He's been suffering from a lot of physical injuries over the last couple years since the Chavez Jr. fight. So this will be his last outing. When he fought in Argentina, he didn't look that great. Looked a little home cooking-ish with the decision. So now as he makes his return against Miguel Cotto will be game and he'll be ready, but it's just dependent upon which Martinez shows up because he'll still have the superior hand speed, even with the recent knee injuries and a shoulder injury. I forgot what the other injury was he had.
Alrighty.
Too many.
Yeah,
for sure.
What else you got, Dan?
Al, the next question is actually for me, and I wanted to ask you if you could take just a minute or two and tell everybody about your weekend that you spent back down in the at the USIBA. We had the video go out, and I know a lot of people got a chance to see the video, but maybe if you could just take a minute and talk a little bit about what's going on there.
It was a great weekend. I was at the United States Intercollegiate Boxing Association Championships down in Miami, at the University of Miami, and it was a great weekend. This is an organization that provides boxing clubs. They have clubs. It's not an NCAA sport, though. I hope it is soon, for men and women in different colleges. And there were, I think, 28 universities and colleges that participated. University of Michigan won the men's overall team championship, and West Point won the women's overall championship. And I'm going to tell you that it is the purest form of boxing. These coaches who make nothing to do this, and the athletes who clearly are doing it for the love of the sport. If you're around an event like this, it renews your faith in athletics. It really does. And the boxing was fun. Some of the boxers, they have a novice, a beginner, and an open division, and not everybody's at the highest level. But they all get better every tournament I see them in, and the boxing is exciting because they're evenly matched. So it was a great event, and USIBA, as it's known, is a great organization. So check them out, and any help you can be to them would be terrific.
I love the video that you did. You had a really wonderful video that got put out through social media, and I loved watching that because you could really see the ground roots effort there, and there's some sharp potential, I think, in the future.
Yeah, good fighters, and more than anything, the overall intercollegiate boxing program helps these young athletes.
Mm-hmm. Jeandra, did you have a question or two for Al? Did you want to whip in on the table?
Sure. Right now we've been seeing increased activity in the heavyweight division. We've got Ariola Stavern coming up. We have the second Tyson Fury Chisora. We've got Deontay Wilder. Is the heavyweight division returning back to prominence as we try to look towards the future with an inevitable retirement from Vladimir Klitchko? Vitaly's already gone. Can heavyweight division get back to the prominent division it once was?
Yeah, that's a good question. And the examples you gave are an indication that it's at least heating up. The Stavern Ariola fight, of course, is going to be seen on ESPN, which will give it many eyeballs. And I actually think that could be a pretty good fight. Their first fight, Ariola got his nose broken early, and he didn't compete as well as he'd like. I think that could be a very exciting heavyweight matchup. Deontay Wilder, you mentioned, who's in line to potentially fight the winner of that. Then we have Tyson Fury from England, who's fighting Derek Chisora. And there are, you could see matchups, at least now in the heavyweight division. You can see potential matchups that are fun. And I think more than anything, that at least gives it some life, whereas, maybe it didn't have much of a pulse. Although we say that, and yet Wladimir and Vitaly put 50,000 people in soccer stadiums in Europe, and they certainly have a great following. But the problem is they've been so dominant that the division hasn't been fun to watch.
Very interesting. You know, Al, it's funny you mentioned that because it leads in so nicely. And by the way, thank you, Jeandra, for the great lead in here. Because the next question was, is Don King dead yet? And wow, and he also followed it up with, and don't you think it would be great if Don King spent some of his money to help Tito Trinidad out since Tito?
Wow.
How about that? Now, let me tell you something. I thought that was a really interesting statement, right?
Yeah.
Who has the biggest PR problem in the world, right, at this moment, right? Don King. Wouldn't that have been a magnanimous step for him to come in and, you know, lay some money on Trinidad or help in some way? Here's
an interesting point. Recently, my friend Antonio Tarver got into some issues financially, and the often maligned and sometimes praised Al Hayman, who's this, you know, giant shadowy figure over boxing, did something that demonstrates one thing about Al Hayman that you can say is the fighters that are managed by him don't seem to have any complaints. And he gave Antonio, he paid a gambling bet, I think it was $300,000 or something for Antonio Tarver to get him out of the soup, which is an interesting development. I agree with you. Don King could probably go a long way toward repairing any damage that he may have in terms of his overall reputation by doing that. Number one, it's very sad what's happened with Tito Trinidad. I don't even know, and apparently he is very far in debt, so this is not an easy fix. As to Don King being dead, by the way, no, he is not. Rumors of his death have been greatly exaggerated. He is not a major player in boxing anymore. He really doesn't have. He has one or two fighters that are of note, but beyond that, he's just not a major player anymore. And I doubt that we're going to see him enter into the boxing fray as a major player.
Well, he's the promoter for this Arreola fight, though, right?
Did he
pay a huge amount of money, 1.2, 1.4 million or something for it?
They got ESPN to pay. It wasn't quite that big. It was, I think, $500,000 for this fight, which is still a lot of money for that particular fight. And he and Dan Goosen are co-promoting. And you're right, he is involved in that. Whether that can, he's got Stavro, whether that can take him back and vault him to the top of the sport with the one fighter remains to be seen. But he will be a player still in some level.
Right.
Excellent. Okay, next question. Michael wants to know what do you think about the marketing fight poster controversy from last weekend? Yeah, Postergate.
Well, here's the thing. What made it interesting was that we had a fight in which Manny Pacquiao and Tim Bradley, who are very respectful of each other and didn't create a lot of fireworks, at the press conference where Bob Arum went off on this, it created a story, actually, because while the fight was certainly interesting and we all wanted to see it, sometimes those kind of extra fireworks help sell a fight, I guess. To be perfectly candid, and I don't think there's any other way to look at this, I think the MGM was completely wrong. They may get mad at me for saying it, but I don't know how you put up, and listen, I'm going to do the Mayweather-Maidana fight on May 3rd. I think it's going to be a terrific event. I am part of that, the televising of that fight and all the rest of it. But you can't fault Arum too much for being distressed because, there's an event going on the property and it's being dwarfed by advertising for an event that's coming. I get it. Now, you can ask the question, should he have gone public with it? Should he have said what he said? Was it less than, civil of him to do that? That's another question, but I totally get why he was distressed. And what it did was it created an interesting story. And here's what the other thing that is kind of, for a lot of people will be distressing because it further demonstrates how many factions we have everywhere. Now we even have a promoter mad at a hotel. So and people lining themselves. Boxing, unfortunately, now is becoming, the Cold War is heating up, and it's involving promoters, it's involving networks, and even properties. So that's an issue. It's not, we can joke about it, but by the same token, some of these alignments are issues. And this one, just when I thought I had seen everything, in boxing. You see a promoter and the actual hotel promoting his event having a feud. Dan, you never expected to see that, did you?
No, and in fact, some of the little head slaps that Bob Arum threw out there were hard ones. There were some. I felt the one when he talked about how one company's making $1 billion a quarter and the other one's hustling to pay their bills. Yeah. Oh, that was a pop.
He threw a couple of shots just a little below the belt there, but it was interesting. But I understand his viewpoint. I also understand MGM not being thrilled that he took that opportunity to say that. But it's a tricky deal.
Well, the other thing also is that when you go into the MGM Grand, and I wasn't there for this fight, but when you first walk through the door on the left-hand side, do they still have the 5 or 6 Mayweather robes that take up that whole opening section of the hotel when you first walk in? Or did they move those?
Outside, and a lot throughout the hotel. And they did have, in the lobby area, they had a lot of Pacquiao Bradley stuff, but it was, I think you can make a statement that the preponderance of the advertising seemed like it was geared to Mayweather Pacquiao. Now Mayweather, that was Freudian. Mayweather Maidana. They did change that during the course of it after Arum's tirade.
Yeah, props to them for making the adjustment.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, next question. The actual next question we have is coming from Alex, one of our video callers. Alex was here last time. What's up, Alex? How are you?
I'm all right. Thank you, Dan, for the introduction.
Yeah, there you go.
It's good to see you again, Al, and I hope you get well soon.
Thank you.
I have a few things I want to talk to you about this week. First off, I want to go back a few weeks, discuss a couple recent fights. They were controversial fights. I wanted to know what you thought about these fights and what you think is in the future for the fighters. First off, let's go to Curtis Stevens versus Toriano Johnson. I wanted to know what you thought about the fight, what you thought about the stoppage, and, what do you think's next for those guys?
I thought the stoppage was just a smidge premature. I understand the concept, but, maybe for me, a little premature on that.
Okay. Yeah, it was a close fight. I think Toriano Johnson showed a lot of heart. He came to win that night.
My God, he performed well, yeah.
Yeah, he was taking the fight to Stevens pretty much the whole 12 rounds. He got caught at the end, and, the ref stepped in to do his job. It could have gone either way, I think.
Yeah, and I think that one was a tough call. And you have to feel for Johnson but here's the thing. He did stamp himself as a middleweight contender in this fight, and that part will be good for him as we move forward.
Yeah, just like, sometimes when you win, you really lose. When you lose, you really win.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to another, I haven't spoken with you for a few weeks, so, you've been missing in action, Dan. I wanted to know, what did you think about the Garcia versus Herrera fight?
Yeah, on the air, I suggested that I thought that Mauricio Herrera won the fight. Mm-hmm. I had him ahead by, I think, 2 points. And, my scoring is just and I say it all the time. I'm announcing a fight, so nobody should go by my scoring. But my impression was that he might have won the fight. I certainly think the 116-112 score by 2 of the judges for Garcia was off. There is no way to see that as an 8-4, 8 rounds to 4 fight for Danny Garcia. I don't know how that's possible. The judge had added a draw. I can appreciate and understand the possibility of that. I thought Mauricio Herrera was sharp. I thought he fought extraordinarily well. Again, he's a fighter I hope gets other opportunities now in the 140-pound division.
Yes.
And I thought Danny Garcia, did you ever think we would be sitting here saying that between Lucas Matisse and Mauricio Herrera, the fighter who was better at being aggressive against Danny Garcia was Herrera? I don't think we would have thought that, would we?
No. Have you heard anything about maybe who's next for Danny Garcia?
I have not. They've not talked about, where he would go next. And I'm sure he's going to fight in a few months. That's one of the pieces, that's out there that I don't know if they know quite what to do.
Would you like to see a rematch?
I would. Yeah. I mean, I don't know that he would do that, but I personally think it would be interesting. And I said going into that fight that Herrera was a threat. He had fought Provodnikov to a standstill. He and same with Alvarado. He'd beaten Provodnikov in a close decision. How could he do that and not be worthy as a 140-pound fighter?
He really went into the devil's playground. He brought the fight to Garcia. I think that he outpointed him. And, if they did make a rematch, I would love to see it in Vegas or California.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think, that was clearly a fight with Danny Garcia going back to Puerto Rico, where he's not from there, but his family is. And so, if anybody had the home field advantage, it was Danny Garcia.
Okay, one more thing. And I wanted to know your opinion on, the card this weekend. A big card, triple header, Hopkins, Malignaggi, Porter, Kid Chocolate. What do you think about those fights?
Yeah, I think, the Pauli Malignaggi Sean Porter fight's fascinating to me, and I interviewed Sean Porter, and it's up on the Boxing Channel at boxingchannel.net. Sean Porter's coming into his own as a fighter. He's kind of starting to reach his peak, and he's a very difficult fighter to fight. He's very awkward. He's strong, physically strong for a welterweight, and he comes at you in such an odd way. Attacks from, punches come from different angles, and he looks like he's easy to hit, but he's not quite as easy to hit as he seems, and his performance against Devin Alexander was excellent. Pauli Malignaggi has fought very well in his recent fights. He very closely, he won the fight, the championship, in the other guy's hometown, home country. He defended against Pablo Cano, and then he lost a very close fight to Broner, and then beat Zab Judah. So he's fighting on a high level. At age 33, he still knows how to fight. And I would actually say this version of Pauli Malignaggi is more fan-friendly than the one we saw 6-7 years ago.
Yeah, big time.
More stationary. He throws more combinations. No, he's not a power puncher. He's never going to be. But he makes for intriguing fights. And I think this fight is a very close fight. I think it's going 12 rounds. And I'm fascinated to see how it turns out. Hopkins and Shumenov, I also think is going to be, I saw somebody on the tweet, a simple tweet. This was, they said, Shumenov is a bad fighter. He has no chance. That's completely wrong. Shumenov's a good fighter. A great fighter? I don't know. He's a good fighter. He's got a version of the championship. And, Bernard Hopkins is 49 years of age. So even though he's performing at a high level, you still wonder, if he fights a guy 19 years his junior, how is it going to go? So I think that's going to be a very interesting fight. And the Quillen defense, you have to rate Quillen a pretty big favorite in that fight, but we'll see what Kanazi can bring.
Jeandra, do you have any predictions on that one? On any of those?
I'm probably most intrigued also by the Malignaggi-Porter fight. That's the one I'm looking forward to. I agree that this version of Pauli Malignaggi is more fan-friendly. He fights with a lot of heart, and he'll definitely be game against Sean Porter, so that's a hard one to call. Hopkins versus Shumenov, that's going to be a gritty, dig deep, holding on, close contested fight between the two of them, but I agree. I think Hopkins can do enough to pull it out. Because Shumenov's career, he has a version of the belt, but he's fought minimal competition. He has a lot of victories against, kind of mediocre journeyman type of competitors. So Bernard Hopkins is crafty. I think unless Shumenov knocks him out, which is unlikely, I think Hopkins should win by decision. And with the other fight on the card is Kid Chocolate. I don't think Kid Chocolate will have any problems. I saw something recent that said he was fighting for respect, but I don't think that this is the fight for respect. But I think he shouldn't have too much trouble getting past his Kova. Forgive me, I can't remember what his competitor's name, but I don't think he should have too much trouble.
Yeah, he should get through the
Kovacs.
Yeah. No,
I
should know it, and I can't remember his last name.
I never pronounce it correctly.
Next question, Al. Bob P wants to know if Mayweather beats Maidana, is there a chance that Pacquiao will be next?
Gosh, we've never
had that one.
Have we? My personal feeling is I just don't think that fight's going to happen. I don't think we're ever going to see Pacquiao Mayweather. I just don't. I just think there's too many obstacles to it, I just don't know how it happens. I think there are too many issues in terms of promoters, big personalities, fighters and all the rest. I don't see it happening, and it's just going to have to be one of those things that boxing fans have to live without.
Yeah. It's kind of sad, though, isn't it?
It is sad. It's very sad. And it drives home the point that boxing, unlike other sports, in other sports, sometimes we don't get the matches we want, but they happen because someone upset somebody else. Right now, maybe we'd all like to see the San Antonio Spurs and Heat play again in a great 7-game series like they had last year. If it doesn't happen, though, we understand the reason why it didn't happen, that either somebody in the Eastern Conference upset the Heat, which doesn't look that likely these days based upon the way the Pacers are playing, or certainly, which could happen in the West, somebody upset the Spurs. We understand why it won't take place, but at least there's a chance, and nobody can decide who they want to play. The problem is in boxing, the schedule is not made in advance, and people, because of all these issues, the best don't always fight the best.
I'm going to skip ahead, Al, one of the questions, because we're going to stay right in the same vein. Victor W. wants to know, who do you think Manny fights next? The winner of Marquez Alvarado, Provodnikov, or what about Jesse Vargas?
Yeah, I think I don't think Jesse Vargas would be a viable candidate for him at this juncture. Jesse just won a world championship in a very close fight. But I think he'll fight the winner of Marquez and Alvarado, which, by the way, I think could be either of those fighters. I like Mike Alvarado. I know he ended up losing to Provodnikov, but remember, he was fighting very well in that fight. And Provodnikov, we know now, is just a murderous puncher. But the winner of that fight, I think, will likely be the fighter that Pacquiao fights.
Excellent. Okay. Next question. James in England, who wants to know, who do you like in Froch Groves 2 and also on the undercard, DeGale Gonzalez?
Yeah. I've done a lot of the James DeGale fights recently on Channel 5 over in England, and he's a very good fighter. He better than a lot of people give him credit for, because he was an Olympic champion. I think DeGale will probably beat Gonzalez, and the Groves-Froch fight is such a fascinating fight. Of course, for people remember there was a controversial ending stoppage where Groves had been ahead on the scorecards and the fight was stopped with several rounds left to go. There's going to be close to 80,000 people at that fight, which is staggering. It just shows you the love of boxing in Great Britain, and also how that match has captured people's imagination. What makes it a hard fight if you want to make a hard prediction, what makes it difficult is, was Froch ready to stop him, or was Groves going to continue on? Now, I thought the stoppage was too soon, but it's conceivable Froch would have stopped him later that round or in another round. And remember, Groves had him hurt earlier. I don't actually have a prediction on the fight, but I tell you what I do think. I think it's going to be just as exciting as the first fight, and I think it's going to be a great fight.
Totally agree. All right, let's go to our other video question. Neil. Hey, Neil. Neil's coming back in. He was in with us last time from up in Victoria, BC. How you doing, Neil?
Fantastic. Can't complain.
Excellent. What was your question for Al tonight?
So I actually got two lightweight questions for you, Al. Given how you're feeling, I hope you appreciate that. Number one, I guess, who's the nicest fighter? You've been in this for a while, so who's the nicest guy outside of the ring that we might not know, given what we do from our end?
That is a great question, and I'll tell you that you couldn't ask me a harder question, and the reason is simple. And I'm glad you asked it, because it gives me a chance to say what I'm about to say. Well over 90% of the boxers I deal with are delightful. That's a pretty high percentage, isn't it, of any group to say they're delightful, whether it's optometrists or plumbers or baseball players, or anything. And I've been around so many of these boxers who are a delight that you'd like to have as your neighbor. One of the nicest I ever was around was a fighter years ago named Harold Brazier. I don't know if you remember him. He was a 140-pounder who never won a world title, though he fought once. He used to fight on our ESPN series. He was a car salesman in South Bend, Indiana. kept his job as car salesman all the way through his boxing career, even though he fought as high as for a world title. And he was just a lovely, lovely guy. But I chose him out of the blue. Trust me, I could name 200 fighters that I've come in contact with who are delightful and nice and pleasant. And when we have our fighter meetings, you know, as we're going to do this week, getting ready for our Showtime matchup, invariably all my comrades or our announcers and I say the same thing. We say we hate to see anybody lose. Mostly we're sitting there after those meetings thinking we don't want anyone to lose because these guys are so pleasant. And I know some people may find that hard to believe since so often we see boxers posturing. But for the most part, they've been very pleasant to me.
You know what I was going to add, Al? One of the things that when I got the opportunity to go with you to the Boxing Hall of Fame back in 2012, I mean, I met legends and all these incredible people. And the person that struck me that I was most intimidated or most concerned about was Marvelous Marvin Hagler.
Oh, yeah.
What an incredible, sweet, kind, wonderful man he was. I was blown. I was going, and he was just the kindest, sweetest guy.
People had that. Boy, Dan, that's a great example because back in the day, and by the way, apparently today is the 29th anniversary of the Hagler-Hearns fight, which I broadcast. Oh. And I remember doing interviews leading up to that for the closed circuit telecast, and I remember some of the people, and I'd been around Marvin Hagler, like he was coming in to do the interview, and so, I don't know if he's in a good mood. They were concerned. I said, well, you don't have to worry about Marvin Hagler. He's a solid guy. And he came in and we did a great interview, hugged, and, people have this, because he was a tough guy in the ring, some people have the impression that maybe outside it he wasn't as cooperative and solid as you want. And he really is. And as you pointed out when you saw him at the Hall of Fame, he is, he's just a great guy.
He was a sweetheart, and that do you remember that morning? The morning it was the induction day was right after the Bradley Pacquiao fight, and I don't remember who said it, but somebody came in right after and said something to Marvin and said, "Have you ever seen a bad decision like that before?" And, maybe one time, and then Sugar Ray Leonard's on the other side of the room, and he jumped up.
Well, I'll tell you what was worse even for him than the Leonardson was when he had a draw against Vito Antuofermo in his first try for a world title match. He won conservatively 11 rounds of that 15-round fight, and they ended up calling it a draw against Marvin Hagler.
That's great. Okay, Neil, you had another question?
Yeah, so one more. Where are the craziest fans? What country, what city, what place? Where are the nuttiest guys who just love this stuff?
Oh, you mean like fans that really are insane?
Well, insane. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, exactly. Who gets the most into this?
Insanity, right? There's the ones that are nuts that do crazy things at the fights, but then there's the other thing I know you're alluding to is who's the most fervent in their love of boxing. I'll tell you, in terms of fervent fans that just love the sport, I'll tell you a couple places. The UK, which we talked about, they adore boxing. The fans there they love every walkout bout, every undercard fight. They just appreciate,
It goes back to pugilism with them, right?
Yes, well, they were the fathers of pugilism. It really was. The Marcus of Queensberry rules were, formulated there, so it is kind of the home of modern boxing. Puerto Rico, even though I got hit with a water bottle down there, I'm sure they weren't aiming at me. Great fans. Clearly, we know the Mexican fans are phenomenal, and in the United States, there are great pockets. One of the places now that's such a hotbed of boxing is San Antonio, where the fans have come out in huge numbers, including almost 40,000 for the Canelo-Austin Trout fight. And the last time we were down there, we had great fights, and there were a lot of fans on hand. And so there are hotbeds within the United States as well. I'll tell you where the nuttiest fans were, and I wrote about this in my book, 30 Years, 30 Undeniable Truths. We used to go to Massachusetts for ESPN shows on a regular basis, and alcohol, I think, played a role in both. I'm just guessing. The fans in Massachusetts, for some reason, were, let's see, what's the word I want to use? Insane is what I'm looking for. they would do anything. And we had one fight where Sal Marciano and I were doing the open for our show, and there was a little delay attached to that. And they got angry, and they just kept. There was a whole segment of the crowd out there in front of us that said they kept chanting, "You guys suck." I was pretty early in the game in broadcasting. I've only been in 2 years, and I'm like, oh my God, why do they hate me? Why do they hate us? And then, afterwards, Sal said, nah, they don't hate us. They just want to get the fights going. So, but we had some crazy experiences in terms of materials being thrown and all kinds of other stuff there.
It's a term of endearment.
Yes.
Oh, that's great. Hey, Al, I think that's about it for our questions tonight. I think we want to, first of all, thank you, Alex, and thank you, Neil, for both coming in tonight.
I want to stay with Jeandra for a second before she leaves as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But I also wanted to make a... Yeah, there you go. I also wanted to mention that we do have, and let me pull it up here for you, we wanted to remind some people about your upcoming Hangouts that we have, because we have a couple of really good ones. The first one is coming up on April 22nd. I will put this up on the screen so that everybody can see it. April 22nd, we have Colleen joining us, and we're going to get to part 2 of our presentation here of our history hangout with her, and we're going to get a chance to talk about Tex Rickard. And I know that you've already done you did a great video review on that on the boxing channel, right, Al?
Yeah, we did talk about a great book about Tex Rickard. Fascinating. One of the first, we were talking about Don King before, the first great promoter of the sport of boxing, Tex Rickard, and a unique individual. I mean, really an interesting person on all levels.
And a big-time cowboy.
He was, and of course that made him near and dear to my heart and your heart. Yeah, he was a true cowboy. Worked on ranches and then became the first promoter at Madison Square Garden, and a rare individual.
We have some really special photographs also that Colleen has provided us, and there's some photos of him. I actually made the term, I said, he looks like the turn-of-the-century Mac Daddy. He really does. He's got this beautiful coat, and he's the cane, and he's got the watch, and he was a very impressive man. And then the other one we wanted to talk about a little bit was the boxing hangout on May 27th, which is what everybody was asking for, the big British boxing show.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Frotch Groves and some other issues about the many fights in Great Britain. And, of course, I'll have just returned from doing fights on May 17th there. Excuse me. Actually, I told you I had a cold. I wasn't kidding.
Absolutely. Again, thank you so much for coming in like this while you're under the weather.
We got to play through,
The other thing we were going to mention is that it looks like we're going to be doing a boxing hangout from the Boxing Hall of Fame.
Yep, that's going to be really exciting. On that fight weekend, it's the June 7th weekend, I believe. We're going to be there. And there is a picture of who's that guy in the pink shirt there? How'd they let
you go?
I was the Tommy Hearns being inducted, and I was tagging along in that induction class. And it's great. It's going to be great fun there.
Really looking forward to that. That's going to be a lot of fun, and there's a lot of chance to see. We've got some great inductees this year with Oscar and Felix, and I didn't know.
Malignaggi. Great. Those three represent a tremendous group going into the Hall of Fame.
I'm going to see if I can get that one in there. I'll be bringing. I was at that fight. That was one of the great ones, and I'm looking forward to seeing them again live.
Should be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Before we let you go, first of all, people can go to badculture.net and see your what you write and what your podcast, your radio show, and I'm happy to say that you're going to do some video work for us on the boxing channel at the end of April as well, which is going to be a lot of fun. So we'll get to work together in person.
Instead of virtually.
Yeah, so that's going to be a lot of fun. You're a great boxing journalist, and I'm very happy that we'll get a chance to work together.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks to everybody for joining us today, and the next time we have these Q&As, we need more of you to come on and join Neil and Alex, and we so much appreciate them coming on and doing this. You guys had fun, right?
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
All right, we appreciate it very, very much. We'll get more of you on asking questions. Technologically, you can do it. I have confidence in all of you, and we appreciate your questions. And Dan Parks, you're the man, and we look forward to the next Hangout.
Fantastic. Have a good job. Enjoy, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Feel better,
our History Hangout.
Thank you so much. All right, you all take care, and we'll see you next time on the Boxing Hangout.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.